Last week on the Jacob Pyle Show.
And, we've all seen commercials on TV, with robots, making cars and stacking boxes and those sorts of things. And we don't do robots at Horner Automation, but we do products that are programmable logic controllers is what we do. And those, just like a robot, when a customer buys a robot, it doesn't automatically start making cars or stacking boxes. Whoever buys the robot has to program it to do that. So that requires expertise, right? So our product is a programmable logic controller. It's kind of the heart of what automates a whole variety of things out there in the world. And when we ship it, it doesn't do anything until one of our programmers or one of our customers basically programs and sets it up to do its thing. So that's kind of the automation type.
We will conclude our conversation with Chuck Ridgeway right now on the Jacob Pyle Show. Good morning, and welcome to the Jacob Pyle Show, starring Jacob Pyle, featuring Zach Brown, and tonight's guests, Chuck Ridgeway and Laurie Kay. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Pyle Media Ventures studio in Sharpsville, Indiana, your host, Jacob Pyle.
Thank you, Jeff. And joining me via Zoom from his home in Indianapolis, Indiana, my co-host for this week, Zach Brown.
Right. Thanks, Jacob. And welcome to the Jacob Pyle Show for this Saturday night, Sunday morning, March 14th, 2026. So glad to have you guys with us. As Jeff mentioned at the top of the show, we are going to conclude Jacob's conversation with Chuck Ridgeway tonight. And then we are also going to begin a 3-part conversation with Laurie Kay, and we'll have that for you shortly.
We have a new announcer on our show, as you just mentioned. His voice is amazing. He asked us just to refer to him on the show as simply Jeff. And yes, I do have a dad whose name is also Jeff, and it's not that Jeff, but a different Jeff. But Jeff, if you are watching this tonight, welcome to our family. Zach?
Welcome. So tonight we are going to be doing something a little different. We're going to try an attempt through Zoom to do an unscripted conversation for the remainder of the time leading up to the first commercial break. If you remember when the show was referred to as Jacob and Taryn Ray, Jacob and Taryn used to open each week's show with this very conversation. And most weeks, Jacob will be joined on the show with Taryn Ray Smith. Unfortunately, Taryn Ray just couldn't make it. She's been a little under the weather. She couldn't do it this week, so I'm just filling in for the newer viewers who have found us on YouTube, by the way. Welcome. We're glad that you found us. Jacob has in front of him a topic with a list of questions that he has not shared with me prior to the taping. And from those questions, we can kind of build a unique and interesting conversation between the two of us. Jacob?
Okay, so this week's topic, I want to go back to the announcers thing because a lot of viewers were curious as to why there's been so many announcers on the show in the few weeks. And I'm going to attempt to describe this without stepping on anybody's toes or going into too much detail. And I want to get your thoughts on it too, Zach.
Sure.
So basically, the original announcer on the show, and I'm not going to say his name, it's not you, Zach, but another announcer. Ever since the move to Kokomo from Noblesville, I've been in constant communication with the gentleman in hopes of him updating the intro because the voice track was originally recorded back in August of 2024. And a lot of the stuff that was recorded on the original is out of date, and we had to edit portions of the audio out to better accommodate the situation. And I haven't heard anything from the guy, silence. And I later found out that his workload has been substantial to the point where he's no longer taking any new clients at the moment. He has not been ignoring my emails. He's just been too busy to even do it. So
Sure.
At the beginning of the year, I said to you and to everyone, we're going to have to break down and hire another guy to succeed him until if and when he decides to come back to the show. So The next guy we hired on was through an agent. I guess I can explain the behind-the-scenes stuff of an announcer, and honestly, it's a quick and easy thing. So, and you know this, Zach. The stuff that we loop on each week's episode is recorded only once. The intro at the top of the show, as well as the address, plug, and sign-off. And the only time we have to update that in the system is at the beginning of every year, or if something comes up on my end where things need to be updated. The rest of the stuff, which I have to have recorded fresh each week, the guests' names, as well as the on-the-day trivia segments, are considered add-ons. So while the agent wants me to, every time the voice talent wanted to do these so-called add-ons, for each additional add-on, he wants the voice talent recorded. He wanted me to sign paperwork for it. And I kind of didn't feel comfortable doing that, so that's not working out. So luckily my good friend, and I can say his name, Butch McCain, was kind enough to fill in for the announcer for a few weeks, so we found another guy. And then the next guy we hired, and I'm not going to say his name either, he does a really good job, but, and maybe I can get your thoughts on this too, Zach, but the recording, when I go to play it back, kind of sounds like it's coming through a straw, to explain it nicely.
Yeah, and I've noticed that the show, for one, has a very classic appeal. We like that, that booming voice that previous announcers on the show have had. And when you have, and I've actually helped you with this, if you remember, whenever you're layering those two pieces of audio together, I've heard it, and it can sound a little canny, right? Tin canny, or a little distorted. So I'm not sure what is involved on your side of things, but yes, I have heard that sound for sure.
Okay, and then the next guy I eventually found and hired, Jeff, and I think you said, Zach, that he does sound just like the original guy we originally had on the show. He does an amazing job. What do you think of his voice?
I mean, he's very similar. I think it matches the vibe of the show perfectly.
Yeah, I'm like, you think about it, and it's like basically, it's like you are, he does a good job at what he does, honestly, because, you can kind of hear that classic, you can hear that boomy voice, like you said, in it.
Yeah.
And I think, he does an amazing job, honestly, at what he does.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
Yeah. So now I want to get your thoughts on this too, Zach. With the time that we have left, we still have about roughly 4 more minutes. What are, and we kind of talked a little bit about this too, because you're a voice actor yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you've also, before we had you on as a and I'm going to tell your side of the story too, because when we first did this show, you were pretty much like everybody else, just an announcer. And then I think 1 week something came up on both me and Taryn Ray's end, and you literally, on a moment's notice, said, "Sure, I will be more than happy to get in front of a camera and fill in for you guys." And you did such a job that I was like, maybe we should find another announcer and just have you do the co-host, and just have you as a co-host, because you did,
So you promoted me, so thanks for that.
I promoted you, and the fact that you and I are working together this week, it's like you're a professional, you're a top-notch professional, Zach.
Thank you, Jacob. I appreciate it. I try. Sometimes it's hard to stay professional, but I do what I can.
That's all the time we have for our conversation today. Go ahead and take us to break.
Of course. So when we return, Jacob will present the conclusion to this conversation with Chuck Ridgeway. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Before we go to break, it's time for this week's On This Date trivia question. On this date, March 14th, 1973, This future U.S. Senator was released after spending over 5 years in a North Vietnamese prisoner of war camp. What was the name of the U.S. Senator in question? I'll have the answer for you when the Jacob Pyle Show continues. Let's return to this week's On This Date trivia question. On this date, March 14th, 1973, this future U.S. Senator was released after spending over 5 years in a North Vietnamese prisoner of war camp. What was the name of the U.S. Senator in question? The answer is Senator John McCain. Once again, here's Jacob.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome back. Tonight, we are going to finish out a 3-part conversation that we started on last week's show. My guest was Chuck Ridgeway, an automation manager for Horner Automation. So now, without further ado, here's the conclusion to that interview. So now, we're going to talk a little bit about industrial automation. Tell us about that.
Okay, so really industrial automation just kind of rolls in the automating of industrial applications. Okay, so we've talked a lot about automation today, or I have, about automating things like football stadiums or whatever the case may be, right? Water systems, that sort of thing. So industrial automation really just kind of encompasses automating just any kind of manufacturing process. Okay. You know, whether you're making some sort of metal product or whether you're making computers or whatever it is you're manufacturing, generally industrial automation is just kind of encompasses automating any kind of manufacturing process.
Gotcha. Now, I understand that you yourself are doing a podcast on YouTube. Tell us about it.
Sure. So this all kind of started, first of all, at my company, I was kind of the one that did presentations for years, right? I was a product manager. Talked about it being an automation manager, and communicating with the public is one thing I had to do, and I always did a pretty good job at it. But when we had the pandemic, it became a scenario where we could no longer get in front of our customers on a face-to-face basis because it just, was deadly potentially.
Right.
So at that point, we decided as a company, and our owner basically said, hey, let's see if we can have kind of weekly online events to educate our customers and to tell them about our products. Because we have a highly technical product and it takes a lot of training. So, during the pandemic, we started these weekly webinars. And then over time, it just kind of evolved, it went from just kind of business software webinar type approach to more of a YouTube and live stream type approach. So every week on Tuesdays, you can call it a podcast, you can call it a live stream, you can call it whatever you want. But every week on Tuesdays, we have a technical session where we cover one aspect of using our product in a industrial application or any application really, whether it's programming the product using the software, whether it is using a product in a certain way for a certain application, maybe controlling the temperature of an oven or something when you're making pizza or making any product, whatever. And we just do that on a weekly basis, and thankfully we have a really good team at Horner that is there to support me for things like the editing and some of the content creation and those sorts of things. That makes it possible for us to produce this weekly podcast, if you will. And we've been doing it now since, mid-2020.
Awesome. I just thought of another question that came to mind.
Sure.
How has automation changed since the COVID pandemic?
How has it changed? Well, first of all, it continues to get younger, okay? Right. The users of automation, traditionally, a couple years ago, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, when I went and I talked automation with people, most of the people I was talking to were my age or not a whole lot younger than me. And so one of the things that's happened is my generation is starting to turn the reins over to the next generation. And so one thing that became very clear is the way the next generation wants to receive information on technical products like automation. So they want to be able to get the information, a lot of cases, themselves by watching YouTube videos or doing research online. They don't want to spend a lot of time being in front of people. So by the way that we educate people on automation, that's been, I think, the biggest change I've seen. The other thing I would say is, while there was a bunch of work on things like sanitizers and those sorts of things during the pandemic, and rightly so, to kill germs and those sorts of things. Some of that has kind of backed off a little bit. So it didn't really end up being kind of a permanent scenario. It was more of a spur of the moment thing. So during the pandemic, there was a lot of emphasis on, sterilization and those sorts of equipment, whereas that's kind of died off, and you don't see a lot of that. But a big change is really the way we communicate to people about automation. I'd say that's the biggest change.
Cool. All right. So we still have about 4 more minutes left of the segment.
Okay.
So where can people watch your podcast?
Sure. So effectively, if they go to the Horner APG YouTube channel, okay, APG stands for Automation Product, or what does it stand for? I've only worked there for 30 years. But anyway, you can go to the Horner APG YouTube channel, and you'll find 200 or 300 videos there covering all different aspects of automation. Some of it very much geared towards our products, other very more general purpose. So if you just want to learn more about some of the industry standard communications networks or some of the trends in communication, as an example, we have some of the better podcasts you'll find online that can help you educate on those topics. Things like Modbus and Ethernet IP and MQTT and those sort of buzzwords that mean things to automation people, or people learning about automation that don't necessarily mean a lot to maybe the layman. But yeah, go to the Horner APG YouTube channel.
And then I say, I'm interested in one of these automation topics that we just discussed about tonight.
Sure.
How can we get a hold of you?
Sure. So first of all, if you're interested in automation at all, even if you don't necessarily have a really technical degree, we have openings at Horner Automation for entry-level positions in a whole variety of different areas. So we'd love to have you consider Horner as your employer. We're a pretty good-sized company, but we're family-owned, and we have a lot of fun at work. So I would say that's one thing to consider joining the Horner team. If you need to get a hold of me, you can always email me at chuck.ridgeway@hornerautomation.com. That's one way you can get me. I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
All right. That is, we got about 2 more minutes left, and I think that's pretty much that's pretty much all I had planned.
Sure.
So, did you want to say something?
Sure. If you have a couple more minutes, I can tell you about a fun application, if that's okay, to kind of fill up the time. So effectively, one of the neat things that we've been working on, kind of with a partner, I can't name the partner, but understandably, right? There's a lot of these automating of vehicles these days, right?
Right.
Self-guided vehicles, remotely controlled vehicles, that sort of thing. So one of the things we've been working on with a partner at Horner Automation is we've been working with a good customer of ours on automating some heavy equipment that's used outdoors for excavating and those sorts of things. So, where the operator of the equipment can use, effectively their phone or a joystick to remotely control the equipment in an environment where it might be a little dangerous for them to be sitting in the cab, if you will. So again, that's one of the kind of more modern, kind of fun things that we've been involved in as another project I thought I'd tell you about.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Chuck. Incidentally, he is still doing those how-to videos on the Horner Automation YouTube channel. Just type in Horner APG on YouTube and you'll be set to go. We'll be back with part 1 of my conversation with Laurie Kay in a moment.
If you'd like to be a guest on the Jacob Pyle Show, send Jacob an email. His email address is jtpyle1@aol.com. That's also where to email if you'd like a DVD copy of the show. Please include the air date seen on screen when ordering. The DVD is $10. Residents outside of Indiana will pay an additional $5 shipping and handling fee. Once again, here's Zach.
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome back to our show. So for those of you who are just now tuning in, you just missed the interview with Chuck Ridgeway. But not to worry, though. If you're watching this episode live, you can always advance back to watch Jacob's conversation with Chuck. We also have a link attached in the description below this video if you missed last week's show and want to watch the last 2 parts. Okay, on to our next guest. Our next guest features a conversation with a lady who didn't know at the time that she conducted John Lennon's last interview. So from April of 2024, here's part 1 of Jacob's interview with Laurie Kay.
Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Well, I've had an incredible career in rock radio and rock magazines and TV, also in video, music related, where I've done a ton of musician interviews. And starting very early on in my life was the Beatles. I started for RKO Radio writing and co-producing their special RKO Presents the Beatles, which was 14 hours originally, the longest United States radio special about the Beatles ever produced. And then we expanded it to 17 hours and got to change the name to the Beatles from Liverpool to Legend, which I'd come up with earlier, and I was much happier to hear. So that was great. And then from then on, I got to do everything from interview George Harrison on my own solo interview, and then go with my RKO team of Dave Sholin, the music director of KFRC and RKO Radio, and our engineer producer Ron Hummel, to London to interview Paul McCartney. And then a year and a half later, we got to go to the Dakota in New York to interview John Lennon and Yoko Ono regarding the release of Double Fantasy, John's first album, music actually, in 5 years. And it was going to be the greatest day of my life. And unfortunately, it turned out also to be the worst day of my life once he was killed, shot and killed, between 4 and 5 hours after the end of our interview.
Now, what gave you the inspiration to write this book and to tell the story about John Lennon?
Well, it's the #1 episode of my life, of course. And also during the interview, John was so excited because I had brought with me a copy of Yoko Ono's book, Grapefruit, which I had, my original copy. And they were so excited, both of them, because they hadn't seen a copy in years and years. And Yoko said, "Oh, I can't wait to autograph it for you." And John said, "Oh, please, can I autograph it for you too? Because it says right here, Introduction by John Lennon." And I said, "Of course, I'd love to have you autograph it." And once he did, at the end of our interview, once they both did, and then he did, and just did an adorable cartoon of him and Yoko, I said, "Thank you, it's great." And he said, "Oh, well, I love it when authors that I know autograph their books for me too." And I said, "Wow, that's incredible, because I'm going to write a book eventually, and I will be happy to autograph it and send it to you." And he said, "Wow, great." So that, of course, encouraged me right off the bat to write my book. And even though it took me over 4 decades to do it because of all the tragedy and guilt that I felt following that interview, it just enabled me to write my book after all these years.
Now, I told you before we taped our interview that I had a chance to look over your book, and I found this very interesting. And I want to take you back to the beginning, if I may. Your first ever radio job was as a newsroom intern at a radio station, KFRC, the Big 610 in Los Angeles, for those who aren't familiar with it. What was that experience like for you?
KFRC is San Francisco.
San Francisco, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. KHJ was the sister station in LA that I'd grown up listening to. And when I was a journalism student at UC Berkeley, I got an internship at KFRC. I was the very first intern that they'd ever had in the newsroom, and I was so well accepted, and my writing and my interviewing was so well liked, even during the just few months of my internship, that I was offered a job as the news editor. So I dropped out of school, and I immediately went to work at what was basically the #1 top 40 station in the country, according to Billboard. And so that was very exciting. And right off the bat, I got the opportunity, as I mentioned before, to write and co-produce RKO Presents The Beatles, which became The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend. And that was very exciting. And even though it doesn't play anymore, and it was originally released as a reel-to-reel, a series of 14 reel-to-reel. This is hour 12. And I still keep the boxes because I love the Beatles photos and what they mean to me and how wonderful it was to work on. So that was my major start of my career. And I was a newscaster eventually at a station in Omaha, Nebraska, WOW, which was a major 50,000 watt station, the one that Johnny Carson started at, actually. And then I was at Seattle, King AM, another big station for a couple years. And then I came back to KFRC in San Francisco to go on the air as a newscaster and go off to London with my RKO team to interview Paul McCartney, and then eventually to New York to do the interview with John Lennon.
All right, now we got about a minute and 20 seconds left. So real quickly, go ahead and tell the folks how they can purchase this book.
Well, people can go to Amazon and look it up. Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, my life leading up to John Lennon's last interview. Or they can go to just about every bookstore website in the country and buy it online there, or go to most bookstores that seem to have it in stock, including Barnes & Noble and a number of others. And you can go to my website, confessionsofarockandrollnamedropper.com, and find my publisher's website as well, and you can buy it from their website also.
That is such an amazing conversation, Jacob. But unfortunately, as much as we wish we could show more of our conversation, and we will, it's going to have to wait until next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, because that's all the time we have for this week's Jacob Pyle Show. And we hope you can join us then.
Until then, I'm Jacob Pyle.
And from my studios in Indianapolis, Indiana, I'm Zach Brown. For Chuck Ridgeway, Laurie Kay, and all of us on the Jacob Pyle Show, thank you for watching. Stay safe. Good night, everybody.
The opinions expressed on this pre-recorded program are solely those of the participants and does not necessarily reflect the views of this program or Pyle Media Ventures Incorporated. Pyle Media Ventures Incorporated produces this program and is solely responsible for its content.